right. My topic is within the microbiome, and I'll show you the areas which I do my research. So this is a typical place in Bavaria, the part of the world where I'm coming from. And what we're doing is basically looking at children who live in these houses as compared to those houses. So this is all in rural little villages. And what you can see is that these big houses here have something attached to them, which usually is wooden. And these are cowsheds, basically. This is a farmer's house, a typical traditional way of farming in my parts of the world. In the back here, you see the cows, the meadows where they graze. And we compare children who live in the farming environment as compared to neighbor children who are not exposed to those farmers. And we have done a number of studies looking at differences in asthma and allergies, because that's what I'm most interested in. And you can see this is a cross-sectional study. So children are 6 to 12 years of age. And you can see those children who are raised and live on a farm here have lower prevalences of asthma. And there are different ways on how you can define asthma, depending on how severe it is or what other features it has, whether it had still symptoms at school age. And you can see for any of these definitions, there's a very clear differences for those children who live on the farm. Then we did allergy tests. These is blood tests, so we measured those antibodies that are specific for allergens, and you can see this tremendous difference here between these two. And for hay fever, the same thing, and for atopic dermatitis, a little bit less. I'm showing you one study, but over the time that we started sort of this business, there are over 40 studies now all over the world who have shown that children who are raised on farms and live on farms are protected from asthma and allergies. The Gabriel study was done in Europe. It was done in Germany, in Austria, and in Switzerland. And Switzerland is insofar interesting as this is the area where the Amish people came from. And through Mark Holbreich, who is an allergologist in Indianapolis and who is friends with the Amish, I had the possibility to get to know these populations and also to do some studies, because basically he had set up an allergy clinic in the Amish population to help them. The problem was that nobody ever showed up, and the ones who showed up did not have allergies. That was the story he told me, and he made me come to see those places. And I said, look, we have these children from Switzerland. Let's do a study to compare these two populations. And so we used exactly the same questionnaires, the same allergens that we tested. And you can see in blue, these are the Swiss children. This is the rate of allergy tests in the Swiss non-farming children. It's pretty high, up to almost 45%. This is the difference, the quite significant difference here between the farming and the non-farming Swiss children, and the Amish are down here. It's exactly the same allergens that we tested, it's the same age groups. This one is by blood testing, this is by skin prick testing, but never ever would such a humongous difference be explainable just by the different tests that we used. And the same thing here for hay fever. These are the Swiss children, the farming children, the non-farming children. Hay fever in the Amish kids, we had 138 children here, was almost not seen. And then for asthma, there's a little bit of asthma, but I read all these skin prick tests myself, so I can tell you when I asked these children what sort of symptoms they have, yes, they wheeze with viral infections, but they don't use inhaled corticosteroids like we would do in our places of the world. And this is not because they cannot afford or they don't have access. I think it's that because they don't need it. It's nothing of what I would call asthma in my part of the world. And as you know, Amish people are very traditional farmers. They don't run any machines. They have horses, either for their buggies as ways of transportation, or horses to plow and work on the fields. Very traditional. They're dairy farmers, and children get exposed very early in life, as much as our farmers in Bavaria do. We then extended those observations to comparing two farm populations in the United States. One is being the Amish, as I just told you. They have their buggies and their horses for transportation, the little girl with the dog in the cowshed. And this is compared to the Hutterites. Hutterites are Anabaptists as much as the Amish. In fact, I understand both of their languages because it's a little bit German, and I can understand what they tell me in their dialects. And the Hutterites have the same type of diet. I would say it's like my grandparents' diets. They have large families. They have all these lifestyles which are very similar to each other. But there's one big difference, and the big difference is the Hutterites are industrialized farmers. They use very, very modern equipment. They have these huge animal sheds where they keep huge numbers of farm animals. So children are not exposed to those environments. You can see here, I mean, this is one of their cow sheds, which was most robotic. I've never seen myself such a modern stable than this one I went to see. And so we compared these two populations, and we found tremendous differences in the prevalence. As I said, in the Amish, it's very low. This is the allergy tests. And in the Hutterites, it's almost like in the Swiss non-farmers, and the same for asthma, very low in the Amish, and very high in the Hutterites. So we think that this is related to their farming lifestyles. If we go back to Europe now, this is the environment that is best for you if you want to be protected from asthma and allergies. So, and the ingredients that you need to be young. You need to have a mother who was already exposed during her pregnancy. There is something about the consumption of raw milk, but I'm not going to get into this. And it's animals. And the animals that in most of the traditional farmers we have is dairy farming. So a lot of this is cows, but also pigs and poultry. And in the traditional way of farming, you still have some plant material, in this case hay or a straw or hay to feed those animals. So we were interested to see when does this protection start, because I've showed you at school age we have the established protection. So what if, in fact, these children are taken into these cow sheds very early? You must know that in my part of the world, farming is a family business. It's a traditional. They may have 100 cows, they may have less than 100 cows. Everybody working in the cow shed because nobody else is there. And if you don't have grandma or somebody else to watch your kid, you're going to take your kid into the cow shed. So we did a study on about 1,100 families, half of them farmers, half of them non-farmers in 5 European countries. And we enrolled during pregnancy, and then we followed up to age 6. In fact, we followed them up now up to age 10. And in that very first year of life, we had a diary where each mom, for every week, filled out what the child did, whether it had been breastfed, whether it had received any milk, whether it was taken to the stable or to other places. And what we found was a very strong protection for asthma, wheezing symptoms. These are the kids taken to the cow shed very early on, and these are the kids not taken to the cow shed. So very early on, there is a tremendous difference in the symptom rate. So of course, what is the protection? Why is it that we're having this protection? And we'd already seen that the diversity of the bacterial exposure is important. So this is now sequencing of samples that are from the mattress, because what's in the stable is taken to the mattress. But we use not the whole throughput sequencing, but in any case, we did see the more bacterial matter there was in the mattress, the more likely there was to be a farm kid, and vice versa. The more of these detectable bands here, the less there was asthma. And we have now embarked on a study with Rob Knight where we did much more in-deep sequencing than what we did before, and we can repeat this finding. And interestingly, this is now the mattress, and this is the cow shed, where we did deep sequencing 16S with him, and we can see that those where the children have contact to cows, there's much more diversity. And this diversity in the stable is almost the same as the diversity in the mattress to which it is conferred. And so now we say, okay, there is much diversity that protects from asthma, diversity is with cows, so what is what? Is it the cow, or is it the diversity, or is it certain bugs? So we went to those farmers who have cows and looked at whether within those farmers who have cows, we still see an effect of the bacteria. And in fact, this is a heat map, And when you stratify and look whether children have asthma or don't have asthma, you see that this group of children who have asthma lack a lot of these bacterial exposures that the other people don't have. And in fact, the 75 so-called candidate bacterial exposures that are protective. And so even in those that have cows, it is not the cow per se, but it's the bug that relate to the presence of the cows. And since bugs don't come in isolation, there's ways to cluster those, and we performed a cluster analysis, and 1 out of 7 clusters came out to be very significant. And we did quartiles here, meaning we separated the amount of these bacteria into 4 equal parts. The 4th quartile is the highest exposure. And what we see is a very significant reduction in risk. This is an odds ratio. 1 meaning that is the reference, and an odds ratio of 0.2 means it's more than 80% reduction in risk. It's a very strong effect, very significant here. And we also can see that the farming effect, which is about half the risk, if we include these bacterial exposures in the model, is no longer statistically significant, meaning that it explains the farming effect. So very clearly here we have an environment which is protective from asthma and allergies and where bacteria clearly contribute. So early life exposure to animal sheds, and in our hands it's particularly cows, confer that protection from childhood asthma, much as what Rob showed you with the dog and the baby. I think we have a similar scenario here with cows, and we think that the bacterial microbiome which comes along with these cows in these traditional, it has to be traditional settings, are the ones that protect from asthma and allergies. Thank you.
We have time for a quick question if there's any clarifications, or otherwise we'll move on to the next talk. Please use the microphone.
Hi. A quick question. Does it have to be like farms with the cows, or any kind of a environment with the animals would help the kids with the asthma situation?
There is data saying that poultry might help, pigs might help, dogs might help. Sheep and goats don't do the job.